luxury hotel downtown Chicago, and we did our morning meetings in Mandarin, English, and Spanish. Right now, that was just the housekeeping department. You know, when I was in Atlanta as an intern, I was at a hotel in the suburbs, and it was English, Spanish, and Bulgarian that we did the stand up in every morning. And these people traveled all around, from all over for these jobs because they were good paying jobs. You know, they got paid well hourly at these hotels. So that's kind of that part. And I forgot what was the other component of your question.
Yeah, the other component is, you know, how do we create a community strong enough to actually like get in the position to support a hotel? Like, what needs to be there?
Great. That really comes down to community development, right? So are we, and that's a very long-term play. That's a very long-term play. And I think we all recognize that it can't happen tomorrow, but that comes down to each and every one of us using our talents to invest in the community. And that may look like, you know, and it's not just the daily amenities, right? Because usually hotels are there to accommodate people visiting, right? So if you have people visiting, you know, what are they coming in to visit that you can attract into these communities? So a lot of it has, I think there's a big opportunity to seize historic sites, to get some of these historic sites recognized. There's a lot of great you know, just oral history in these communities that if we got that recognized and got them designated as historic sites, that could be very positive. I mean, they already usually have restaurants and things like that. So I think that's the biggest thing is what type, that's more of a tourism side of it. What is it going to be to drive tourists or a corporate demand? So that's going to, you know, that's going to be a larger challenge, right? Like, is there a corporation, you know, within a mile or whatever the radius is that is willing to stay there? The other piece of it too is, and this is kind of where, you know, like, so for once upon a time, the NAACP used to do a lodging diversity scorecard, like a report card. And it was brutal. A lot of these companies, they got, you know, they felt dragged and people felt attacked. But it talked to really a lot about, you know, well, what does your ownership structure look like? What does your board seats look like? How are we involved? So again, so kind of, it doesn't necessarily have to be us supporting it in the community, you know, because some communities, just certain areas, Black or otherwise, just due to geography, there's not anything of interest that's going to cause somebody to travel there. So, you know, and that would just forever be.
Got you. Yeah, no, I love that. And it's given me a lot to think about personally as we think about, you know, community and economic development, you know, from the Black Business School and, you know, the Boyce Watkins Enterprises, you know, perspective. And for those of you guys who are just tuning in, I'm with Omari Head, who is a broker of hotels, you know, based in Washington, D.C. He's given us advice and talking to us in regards to how more African Americans can actually get into the hotel game and why we should be getting into the hotel game as well. So if you like this video, go ahead and press the thumbs up button on YouTube. And if you have any questions for Omari, I'll get to those at the end. Just place them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer as many of those, or Omari will be happy to answer as many of those as we possibly can. So I want to switch gears a little bit and start talking about how more, you know, Black people can start getting into the hotel industry, right? So, you know, my journey in terms of just real estate in general is brand new, right? So I've only been studying this for the last 6 weeks to 8 weeks, right? I am in no way an expert, but thankfully I have enough social capital to call up friends like you and others to come on and talk to our audience, the true experts in terms of hospitality and real estate and all those different things as well. I met one of your friends recently, Mr. Lester Adams, who is the Director of Franchise Development at Choice Hotels. And one thing that stood out to me is the fact that when you meet him, wherever he goes, he carries a copy of the Green Book. Right. So he picked up a copy of the original Green Book at the the new African American Museum in DC, right? So he picked that up and he, carries it everywhere around because that was a guide for African Americans, many decades ago in terms of where they should stay to avoid, racial discrimination.
Right.
And he showed me the number of hotels that were in it. And one thing that's very interesting is the same number of hotels, more or less, that existed back in the 1950s and 40s is the same exact number of hotels that are owned by Black people that exist now. So the rate of Black hotel ownership has not increased over the past 50 or 60 years or more. So can you explain to me why more Black people are not getting into the hotel industry? And then we'll talk more in terms of, how, what's the plan to get more, African Americans in the industry?
Yeah, so I'm glad you touched on the Green Book. That's definitely something that when I first heard about that as a college student, that was very fascinating to me. And my father's 80 years old, and him growing up, remembering the Green Book. And it's funny, he used to always say that, stereotypically and historically, like Black folks traveled to see people and not things. So kind of going back to like you were saying, about being that host and being that ambassador, about, we were staying with people, even if you look at like downtown Chicago, the celebrities weren't, the Black entertainers weren't staying. They were staying on people's houses, in the South Side. And as we all know, with integration, that all kind of, not kind of, it all dissolved, right? We lost that pillar of the community of being forced to support one another. So that transitions into the book, and shout out to Lester and Choice and all the great work that they're doing there. With when you look at the number and why it potentially hasn't grown, it's repositioned, right? So franchising wasn't as big then, right? There was, the brands are using their own money and they were, building them, and there wasn't a lot of hotel brands either, right? So fast forward to today, now lodging is a lot more capital investment, because then you could have an inn or you could have a B&B, which kind of, takes us back to the home sharing platforms now that we have. But it was inns and B&Bs, right? Now you've probably driven past, in the United States, a Black-owned hotel and not known it, because it's a Marriott franchise, or it's a Hilton franchise, or it's a Choice franchise, or it's a Best Western franchise. And then the second part of that is, why don't we have it? They just simply do not know. For whatever reason in our community, everybody knows that McDonald's is a franchisable business. Everybody. I'm talking about, I don't care how young they are, they just know that you can buy a McDonald's franchise. That is a thing, that is an aspiration. If you were to talk to people, and some of them may own, quick service restaurants, QSR, they may own in that segment, and they may not even know that you can franchise hotels. They legit think that Mr. Marriott and the Hilton family own all of these hotels, and it's just not such. So a big piece of it is not even the fiscal capital. I always tell people it's the intellectual capital. Because once you tell people that and they can get up to speed and it's, oh, this is possible, mind is blown. Let me dig deeper into this, and I got to get hip to this game, because there's an opportunity there for me to make money.
No, I got it. And, I agree in terms of it being just not known or even thought about that you can actually go buy a hotel, right? And, one thing that I've noticed as I dig deeper into real estate as well is this perceived complexity of just the industry in general. There's so many different players. There are brokers, there are investors, there are inspectors, there are agents, there's just so many different things and so many different roles out here. And I was like, how does one even go about navigating any of this, with all these different people that come together to make, this complex deal into a reality?
Sure.
And I think that complexity is, leads to paralysis by analysis, at least on the residential front or even the commercial front. But, on the hotel front, I would think is the exact same thing, as well. So can you just talk about, if someone was starting today, they had a little bit of capital, they had some friends with capital, can you help us navigate